Let me begin by welcoming you to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of York. We are pleased to be co-sponsoring this with the Citizens Climate Lobby, and we're doing it because this is really very part and parcel to who we are as a congregation. UUs have 7 principles, 2 of which are applicable to this event this evening. One is the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and within society at large. And the other is respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. So based on that, we are pleased that you're here. We're proud to be co-sponsoring with CCL for all of the hard work that they're doing to help save the planet. So with that, let's start.
Yeah, I'm all wired up. Hello, good evening, everybody. Good to see you. I'm Alex Bishop, your moderator. My thanks to the York and Harrisburg chapters of Citizens Climate Lobby and to our co-hosts, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of York. Citizens Climate Lobby is a nonprofit, nonpartisan group seeking solutions to climate change. It has chapters in every state and in most legislative districts, an affiliate in Canada, and chapters worldwide. We hope you'll stop by our table in the lobby and sign up to join our community. We'd love to have you. 2023 was the hottest year on record. The last 10 years also set a record. In 2022, Congress passed and President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act, the largest climate bill in U.S. history, providing tax credits to boost production of clean energy. But there's more to be done. We need permitting reform to speed up the approval of clean energy projects. The European Union is placing a tariff on goods made with fossil fuels, so U.S. businesses must reduce their pollution to remain competitive, and we may need a carbon border adjustment of our own. We're paying the price for air pollution, climate disasters, increased healthcare costs, and lives lost. Last year, climate disasters cost the U.S. nearly $93 billion. Our candidates have graciously given their time to speak with us, and I thank them for their willingness to serve the citizens of Pennsylvania's 10th Congressional District. Please allow them to speak without interruption, and please hold your applause until each candidate has finished speaking. Several candidates made last-minute accommodations to be here. One candidate, Janelle Stellson, had a scheduling conflict. Another, Mike O'Brien, was unavoidably detained and he will arrive in about 20 minutes or so. Rep. Scott Perry was invited but did not respond, so we had to adjust our format. Each candidate will have up to 5 minutes to answer our first question and up to 4 minutes to answer each of the next 3 questions. We'll signal when time is up, but allow the candidate to complete the sentence, please. When Mr. O'Brien arrives, we'll provide time for him to answer question number 1. If time permits, we'll take questions from the audience. Candidates will have 1 minute each to respond. And regarding those audience questions, we have index cards that have been handed out. If anyone needs one, please raise your hand and someone will give you one. And then towards the end, we'll be doing a Q&A. So with all that, let's get started. Let's go with Mr. Rick Coplen first. Tell us about yourself and why you're running for Congress.
So thanks very much, and thanks very much, everyone, for being here. Also, thank you to the Citizens Climate Lobby, the York and Harrisburg chapters, and thanks to the UUC of York. I want to highlight we listened carefully to all those principles and your missions, and I'm sure we all believe they're very important. I certainly do. So thanks for being here. You know, we face crises today, not just one. We face multiple crises today. And first and foremost, I know we're going to talk a lot about climate. I believe we face a climate crisis. But I'm also confident most everyone in here shares our opinion, my opinion, that we face a crisis in confidence in our democracy. And quite frankly, there are powerful threats. I won't name names just yet, but I think there are also powerful transformational opportunities. So with every crisis, you know, there's danger and opportunity. So I think we can actually strengthen our democracy, and I think I'm well prepared to be a part of doing that alongside you. So bottom line is, we do risk losing our democracy, but working together as Americans, we can defend and strengthen our democracy. To finally achieve our American dream, our aspirational dream from the very beginning of not only equality, but also a government of, by, and for the people that really does solve our problems and guarantees equality of treatment for everyone. So I'm running to strengthen that democracy. Yes, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself in this nice lengthy time that you've given us tonight, but I'm also going to highlight that not only can we strengthen our democracy, and we must, but we must also heal our divisions across society so that we can solve problems, not hold on to them for political gain like Mr. Perry and, quite frankly, Mr. Trump are so good at doing. So I firmly believe that with this strong democracy that we're going to continue to build, we can guarantee for all time women's reproductive rights and freedoms and bodily autonomy. We can reduce gun violence and crime everywhere in America. We can help everyone to earn a family-sustaining wage that not only provides peace of mind, but also a path to home ownership. We can and must make Social Security and Medicare bulletproof from those who would attempt to destroy them, namely Perry and Trump. And probably most importantly, we can restore a healthy climate so that our children and their children can live, learn, and love in a sustainable environment with clean air, clean water, and certainly fertile soil. So those are the things that I think are extremely important. I'm sure we're going to address them. Everybody has on your chairs one of these cards. I would ask you to take a look at it. I would also highlight we have this now posted on our website because it tells you a lot about where I'm coming from, and it does distinguish me from the other candidates, gently. It also says, and I'm serious, please research all the candidates. Please look at our websites. Please see our positions. Our campaign has taken a lot of time, effort, and energy to lay those out very clearly. I'm going to highlight a couple of these, and we'll see how much time I have left, how much I can get to. But one of the things I always want to point out that distinguishes me from all the other candidates is I'm the only one that has won as a Democrat in a Republican district twice, and in 2021 is the top vote getter. Of course, everybody in here knows that's important because to beat Scott Perry or any other Republican in the future in this district, you have to be able to win Democratic votes, independent votes, and Republicans, reasonable Republicans. And I've done that, mainly, I believe, because the people in our district trust me. So a couple other quick things about me. Yep, I'm one of the military guys, but I've had a full life after the military. So in the military, I'm a West Point graduate, combat veteran, provided democracy in Panama, peacekeeping veteran in Bosnia, taught for 3 years at West Point. Thank you very much. 1 minute. And also, something I'm very proud of. For a year, I was a project outreach officer at West Point, and I went to high schools and middle schools all over the country. My mission was to inspire and help young people of color to get into West Point. I'm very proud of that service. So I'm also a lifelong Democrat. I'm a 15-year resident of our district. I've a huge background in community service, to include I'm a Rotarian. In 2012, when I was the president of the Rotary Club of Carlisle, I led 6 counties of Rotary clubs helping with Superstorm Sandy relief. I'm also on the Employment Skills Center board. That is basically an organization that does exactly what it sounds like. We provide help for people to get better and better jobs. I have an ethnic heritage. I'm sure I'll tell you a little bit more about my mom. I'm a teacher. I teach at Elizabethtown College. I taught for 3 years at West Point, and my time is up, and I thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Blake Lynch, and I am so excited to be here tonight. Thank you so much for all coming out and being a part of democracy and being a part of this democratic process, because not only are we running to defeat Scott Perry, because we all believe that we are going to do that. We know we're going to do that, right? Yes, that's right. We've got the momentum and the energy with our campaign that helps bring and unite different generations. One thing I definitely wanted to point out is that with myself, I bring a lot of the next generation vote, something that is really important. Here throughout central Pennsylvania, there are 8 college campuses, and I am a proud attendee of our local public schools, raised in Dauphin County in Steelton. and grew up in Dauphin County, and then went on to attend Messiah College in Cumberland County, serving on the Board of Advisors for Messiah for several years, running track and field, and being an active alumni. I also served on several community boards and organizations and have been a part here in York County for many years. Prior to becoming a full-time candidate for Congress, I served as the Senior Vice President. Has anyone ever heard of an organization called WITF? Of WITF Public Media. I was on the board of directors for 3 years and then was asked to step down and actually come inside of the organization to help rebrand and move us forward and help connect deeper into our community. So the new logo and all of that, that's my fault. So I helped lead that change. For everything with our pledge drives, I oversaw all revenue for the organization, all lobbying. So anytime there was a pledge drive or the Roses campaigns or anything like that, that was me. So we want to make sure that we are supporting not only public radio, but also education. So part of our EITC coverage here in York County, really growing and working with our community partners like Crispus Attucks, like the York City School District, like the Burn Center, like Junior Achievement. I've been here doing the work for many, many years, and also with our local officials here in York City. Proud to then say prior to that, I served as the Director of Community Relations for the Harrisburg Bureau of Police, working actively here in York City on multiple task force, gun control task force, gang task force with Chief Mike Muldrow for several years, and having his support throughout our entire campaign. Also with the NAACP here in York. So those community roots are very deep throughout the entirety of our district. We have the endorsement of so many Democrats, actually the most elected Democrats of all candidates at this time, including the mayor of Harrisburg, the mayor of Lemoyne, the mayor of Steelton, many others who know that we have done the work for years. My family and I, we are raising 2 boys in Dauphin County, 9 and 5, Blake Jr. and Brendan, who are not on the picture, but are on the picture of many of the rack cars that you may see in your seat. And I am a proud parent of a son who continues to advance, especially with an IEP. I understand what our paraprofessionals and our educators go through. I serve on the board of the Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education Foundation, actively engaging to try to raise scholarship dollars for our local colleges and universities throughout the state system, from Cheney to IUP and everywhere in between. Also serving on the board of Central Pennsylvania Food Bank. I continue to bring these things up is because although I'm a first-time candidate for Congress and the youngest candidate that's in this race, however, I'm old enough to be president of the United States and older than when Joe Biden ran for Senate. Does anyone know how old he was for that? 29, that's right. So I'm older than 30, I'll tell you that. And so what I'm trying to draw the parallel is that the diversity of our district is what makes us unique. That is how we're going to defeat Scott Perry. You want to make sure that someone has the business acumen from the C-suite, from the corporate suite of WITF, who understands a $31 million organization, a union shop, over 300 employees, that helped with a merger and acquisition of Lancaster newspaper, who has that experience and understanding to Main Street, understanding what it's like to be raised by a single mom. Because my father, a Vietnam veteran, passed away of a brain aneurysm when I was 3. I understand those struggles. I know what it's like to be raised with no money in the bank and then also to be blessed financially. I understand how deep and how important it is for our community to succeed, and we're going to do all of that. We want to make sure that our next generation is not only inspired to do something, but really impacted. And also our seniors continue to have the resources they need. My 94-year-old grandmother should not have to cut her prescription drugs just to make a choice because she doesn't have enough money. I will be a fierce fighter for all of you, and I look forward to continuing the conversation today. Thank you so much.
If you don't mind, I'm going to stand for this. It's always a challenge following Blake, who exhibits such vigor and youth and never tires of reminding us of this. But first of all, thanks to the organizers for hosting us tonight. This is a great event. I'm happy to be here. I want to start by just telling you a bit of a background I think might resonate with some of you here on the issue of climate change, environmental protection, etc. I've worked in the private sector my entire life, and a large part of that was in Beijing, China. I lived in Beijing from 1995 until on 2 occasions between 1995 and 2010. And I had a small company doing TV production and syndication, worked in the sports area. But I tried to develop another business and I failed. And the business is called My X. Now, my ex was not an app developed to stalk former romantic interests, I can assure you. And the X comes from an economical term that is externalities. An externality is simply everything that we as individuals, as consumers, and corporations dump into the environment on a regular basis. So it's plastic, it's poison into our water systems, it's discarded metals, it's CO2 emissions. And so everyone here, of course, knows how the terrible effects that this can have on the environment. I failed because I realized that I wasn't able to develop a system to measure, quantify, and visualize externalities. And I think this is, eventually someone will figure this out, because this is what we're all trying to do now. This is what we're concerned about, measuring and identifying and accounting for, in an economic sense, externalities. CO2 is, I'm sure we're going to discuss that tonight, but it's everything else. And so this is going back 10 years now. This was the origin of my own thinking on the important issue of climate change and how it affects all of us. But I've seen it really from a global standpoint. But I'm not someone who comes from wealth or privilege. I'll circle back to my own childhood growing up. I'm one of 11 children from an Irish Catholic family. No jokes, please. And my father grew up in the projects of Chester, PA. My father was a truck salesman. My mother was a stay-at-home housewife who took care of the kids. And so we didn't have a lot of extra money. I never heard the expression disposable income until I went to college. For us, there was no disposable income, of course. And so my own life trajectory has been very different. I've been very fortunate. I've had some success in business, and I've had some failures in business. I'm not running as a business candidate. You've seen these type of people before, who try to convince you that since they've signed a check or they've been successful at business, that these skills are transferable to public service. And I'm here to tell you that it's nonsense. It's all nonsense. But going back to my China years, one of the things that I observed was the rightward shift, the extreme rightward shift in the American political landscape from the 90s, the 2000s, and then we had to deal with multiple crises: the invasion of Iraq, the implosion of the financial markets in 2008, the Great Recession, which was lasted far longer than it should have, and the government, in my view, reacted in a very tepid way. And so I've been an observer of this, and throughout this process, I always had a sense of frustration that I was not where I should be. I was out of place. And when I spoke to my wife just a couple years ago, I'd considered running for Congress, and this was after the death of my son, so a really devastating personal loss in the family. I went to my wife and I said, Natalie, I have a new project. And she said, I know what it is. And we'd never discussed this before. Never. I said, well, I know you want to run for Congress. You've always wanted to do this, and you never mentioned it. So I'm running for Congress here, I think, for the right reasons. I want to reverse our rightward trajectory, to help to bring, and of course, no one can do this on our own, but I want to contribute at least to bringing America back to respect for its foundational and, I think, progressive ideals. But in order to do this, in order to defeat MAGA extremists, we have to address the fundamental causes. And this is what I'm doing. We'll have opportunity to talk about it later in the race, but during the course of this conversation. But these causes are, of course, economic inequality, the failure of militarism, and a lack of political accountability. And so this is what my campaign is all about. And I think on all of the issues, I'm taking leadership positions, and we'll talk about this later. Thank you.
Go ahead. Hi, thank you everyone for being here today. I'm slightly differently positioned than the others because you've already heard from me or heard of me. I ran in 2022. I was the nominee back then. So you've already heard quite a bit about me, but I'll just briefly summarize my trajectory. I am a family of immigrants. I'm an immigrant myself. My family moved to the US when I was about 13 years old. And in those days, in the early 90s, my mom could raise a family on one full-time minimum wage job. I was able to go to college, and that's really not an opportunity that's available to our residents in this district anymore. I've been fortunate enough to I went to college at Westchester University, which was a publicly funded university. When I attended, 70% of its income came from state taxes and 30% from private fundraising. Today, those numbers are inverse. The tuition has it's about 8 times what it was when I went to college, even though the minimum wage hasn't increased by that much. From Westchester, my major there was political science and sociology with a focus on international relations. I went to the University of Cincinnati for a joint degree program with a master's in women's studies and a law degree. There, I helped create the first immigration clinic that the universities had. It still exists today. And after that, I went to work for farm workers in Washington State for a few years before moving to Pennsylvania. So I've had a great life that was provided to me by the economic system that we had in the 90s, and I would like other folks in this district to have those same opportunities. Professionally, I'm an attorney. I started out doing employment and civil rights work. I ended doing primarily immigration work. I've also been an educator at a higher ed institution in women's studies and political science. Those are usually the classes I teach. And my experience both living in different places, but then as I began to working with colleagues around the world and traveling around the world for both leisure and work, you get a sense that there's so much that we can do if we just have the will to do it. And it's really extremely urgent for us to have and tackle a lot of the issues that we're facing, right? I was able to see, our icebergs break apart just by the honk of a horn, which was impossible, in the 70s when I was born. I've been able to see the highest lake in the world drop because of climate change. There's so many countries I've been to where the iconic image of that place or even that state is an environmental one, it's a geographic one, but it has been altered significantly over the years. And a lot of our places, a lot of our geography across the world have changed a lot. I was commenting earlier today, I grew up in an environment where waterways were relatively clean, and as a kid, you could just jump into a river or a creek or something and play with it. We have polluted our water so much, I can't just drop my daughter in the nearest waterway near the Susquehanna, even though I'm just 3 blocks from the Susquehanna, right? We have done significant damage to our environment, but a lot of parts of the world have also done and taken steps to try to heal the damage we've done. So we know that the damage that we're causing is fixable, it's repairable if we take action, and it's not a matter of we can't, because when you have a country, that is significantly poorer than us tackling climate change and curing and healing some of their environment, then we can here as well. So I'm running for Congress because I want to make sure that the opportunities I benefited from as a child coming to the United States is available to everyone in this district as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and let's go back to that first question again for Mr. Mike O'Brien. Good to see you. Please tell us about yourself and why you're running for Congress.
Well, thanks for having me tonight. I appreciate it. In 5 minutes, yep. First, my wife Courtney and I, we were born and raised here in Pennsylvania, proud products of Pennsylvania public schools. And we met each other at the Naval Academy in Annapolis. She is still the all-time leading scorer in Naval Academy women's basketball history. I was just an average midshipman with no athletic ability whatsoever. But made it out of there and went on to grad school, went to MIT. She did as well, and then we worked our way up through our entire careers through the pilot pipeline within the Marine Corps. So for 20 years, I was a fighter pilot there. So I flew off of aircraft carriers in Iraq and Afghanistan, and transitioned to the F-35 stealth fighter, worked at the Pentagon for a few years, and then finished it off as a commanding officer of Marines. And so that's kind of like being a CEO, except you're in charge and you're making decisions, life and death decisions, really on a daily basis. And my wife right now, she's a commanding officer over there in San Diego. Our two kids are over there, Brooklyn and Jaden, 10 years old and 7 years old, respectively. And we were actually the first married couple in the history of the Marine Corps to command squadrons. So we're used to being super busy, just like this. So a lot of people ask, like, why would you give that up? You know, you went to Top Gun, and you're flying fighters. Like, why would you do this? Subject yourself to all the scrutiny that comes along with being a congressional candidate. So my why starts way back in 2015. That was I was at the height of my career then, and my best friend in the Marine Corps, his name was Major Taj Serene. He was an Indian American from San Francisco, and he was over there fighting ISIS for 6 months in Iraq and Syria. And on his way back from deployment, he flew through the UK, United Kingdom, and flew into the clouds. And his navigation system, his heads-up display, pointed him towards the ground, and he didn't recognize it, and unfortunately crashed and lost his life. So for me, I lost a best friend. He was 34, had a 1-year-old daughter. I was 34. My daughter just turned 2 at the time. And I said to myself, he was actually bigger than that. He was the type of person that we need here in this world. The type of person that could bring people together from all races, religions, political persuasions. And a couple months later, when his gravestone went in, I kept on rereading the last line on it. And it says, "In service for mankind." So when I saw that, I said to myself that I want to live that same legacy of service and togetherness and put myself where it was needed most. And in 2016, Donald Trump got elected. And the country just went on either side with the waves of divisiveness and negative partisanship, and it became very clear where it was needed most. So all my academic background, that was all engineering. I knew nothing about politics and policy, so I've come a long way. But after those few years, I didn't know when I was going to enter the arena, but that became very, very clear to me in the aftermath of the 2020 election. Mentioned my wife earlier, Courtney. We were actually stationed in the Pentagon in the aftermath of the election, and we heard all the rumors that Donald Trump was going to use military force to overturn the results, declare martial law. And in the lead up to it, we saw all the MAGA hats, the Confederate flags, the American flag pickup trucks. And that morning, my daughter's school was shut down entirely. Everything was boarded up in the city. My wife had to go pick up my son. He was going to childcare across the National Mall. I was driving across the country on a military move, actually, watching it all play out of the corner of my eye on my cell phone. And once C-SPAN shut off, switch over to CNN, I saw the Capitol get breached. I saw the death and destruction that day. There were 5 police officers killed, 150 that were injured. And after all of that, Scott Perry still tried to take away your votes and take away my absentee ballot while I was serving my country, and I took that personally. I could no longer let Donald Trump and Scott Perry attempt to overthrow our democracy under the guise of patriotism, and decided to do something about it. So last year, on September 1st, I retired. 5 days later, I launched my campaign because ultimately, it's time for me to step up. It's time for leaders to step up and start a movement to reclaim freedom, to reclaim patriotism, and reclaim the American flag itself in the name of democracy. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm running.
Thank you very much. Next question. Now remember, the next 3 questions will be 4 minutes for responses. So, women's access to reproductive health care is a major concern. How would you address abortion rights and in vitro fertilization? Let's go with Mike O'Brien. Why not?
For showing up late.
Yeah, a little bit.
It's all good. So I like to answer this question with a story. So I mentioned before just now, I was a commanding officer of a unit, again, of 200 Marines, $1.5 billion worth of aircraft, 13 aircraft in total. And the only people that are privy to medical information within a squadron of Marines is the commanding officer, so me, and then my doctor, my flight surgeon. And so one day, my flight surgeon walks into the room, and he says, one of your most qualified Marines, one of 4 qualified Marines that are qualified to sign off on flights being airworthy, or aircraft being airworthy, she's not coming to work today, and I'm not sure when she's going to come back. And so I asked why, and he's like, she is going through the decision-making process to have an abortion, and she doesn't want to talk to you because she doesn't know how you're going to feel about it. And I immediately got on the phone, called her at home, and I said, look, I know this is incredibly tough. It's an incredibly tough process, and no matter what you decide, either way, we're going to be behind you 100%. And if you need me to cover you, and if you need me to allow you to stay home for a few days to do it, I am 100% okay with it, because I understand that this is a deeply personal issue. Luckily, by the way, we were in California, and she actually had that choice. But this is all to say that that's how I feel about the issue, that the decision to have an abortion, nobody wants to make that decision, and it should be left up to a woman with her family by her side if she chooses, with her physician, and with her spiritual advisor, again, if she so chooses. There is no room for the government or Scott Perry in that decision-making process at all, in my opinion. So I'll also say, with everything going on down there in Alabama right now with IVF, that is a direct threat not only to abortion, but to contraception and overall women's reproductive rights. And we need Congress to, for one, codify Roe versus Wade, but also protect family planning. So Planned Parenthood itself is under attack right now. And I'll tell you, the way to reach the middle class in this society, and I'll bring economics into this, the way to reach the middle class, there's something called the success sequence. And if you do these 3 things, you have a 70% chance of being considered middle class, okay? So that's getting a high school degree, getting a stable job, and waiting till you're in a stable relationship to have children. So what is critical to economic success is family planning. So this attack, again, on IVF, on contraceptions, on sexual and reproductive health, is a direct attack on economics and the economic success of our most vulnerable. So I will do everything in my power to defend sexual and reproductive health, and of course, to include abortion itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go with Shamaine Daniels.
Thank you. My stance, for my entire life, I've advocated and supported the right for women to make their own healthcare decisions. And my approach has always been a more global and more holistic one, right? Because we have a lot of issues in the care of women's health. As a college student, I was a counter-protester at the Planned Parenthood in Westchester. As a law student, I raised funds for our local abortion service provider. As a councilwoman, I defended our buffer zone law, which was upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court the same week that Alabama decided that embryos were children. So we need folks who are actually going to stand up for women's health and women's health care. Pregnancies are complicated, and they're extremely complicated for a lot of reasons, but we also have to take into account higher mortality rates for African American women, right? That's not caused by lack of insurance. That's caused by healthcare providers not taking women's health seriously and their articulation of their issues seriously. So I think just overall, our approach needs to be much more hands-on in terms of being aggressive about protecting women's ability to get good health care and make the decisions that are important. When I had my pregnancy in the middle of the pandemic, for example, everything went fine until about 3 weeks before she was due. If a lot of the rules that are in place now were in place then, I wouldn't have been able to receive the care I needed, and neither would my daughter. So, I am fully supportive of women's reproductive health, women's rights to make their full reproductive health decisions.
It wasn't me. Would you like to continue? Or oh, okay. Are you sure? Okay.
Test. There we go. I do not want to be a cause for feedback. So, when we talk about women's access for healthcare for our women and for our families and community, one thing for sure is that you would like to make sure that those who are speaking about it understand. I served for 6 years on the board of the Hamilton Health Center, the only federally qualified health center in central Pennsylvania. So understanding Black and brown communities and also underserved communities, those who are also in rural communities. In Millersburg, Dauphin County, we had a facility, and in the city of Harrisburg. Our OBGYN provider continued to update our board on what was taking place in our community and the lack of resources that were needed from the federal level. So as running for Congress, using that information from the ground up, I know how we can make those decisions from a local level and bring them to the federal government to ensure that our communities are getting what they need. We need to make sure that our providers are provided the resources and also the safety net that a lot of people with regards to the drain right now on our providers of no one being in, let me slow down. No one being in to help make sure that there are more providers in the pipeline, that our next generation of nurse practitioners and doctors, we need to make sure that there's access to ensure that costs are low, because there are a lot of people that are unsure, especially with IVF. Today, actually right down the road at the Thai restaurant at District Thai, I had lunch today with a woman who is in financial services. Her and her spouse have spent close to $50,000 on IVF treatment. Just today, I got to hear her story. And because I don't want to disclose a lot, because I know that there's being recording going on, I want to say that what she continued to share with me today was was very, very, very painful. Things I didn't know, especially as a man. I have 2 children. We did not need to have that as an available option, but my wife and I have continued to talk about this issue and continue to better understand how we can continue to make sure that there's a person in Congress, myself, to be the largest advocate for our community. There's one thing to vote on bills and issues, but there's another thing when you're in a room full of men or you're in the room to make sure you're speaking up, and which is something that we continue to do when I was at WITF. When the cost of healthcare continued to increase throughout the pandemic and providers tried to increase costs, we made the decisions every year at WITF to not pass that on to our employees. We ate the costs, over 6 figures in 1 year alone, that the costs were sent over for us. And we wanted to make sure that our employees did not have to absorb that, but we did as an organization. Those are decisions that were made at the C-suite. Those were decisions that were made at the executive level because we understood that a successful and productive employee base make sure that they did not have that stress with their families. We know that women's health and productive services are extremely important in the city of Harrisburg. As Shamaine pointed out, she's one of our council members. However, community groups that I have been a part of, including Hamilton Health and WITF, and many others have worked hand in hand with Planned Parenthood, actually with their government relations team, because I lobbied on behalf of WITF and also helped connect our journalists and reporters to make sure that the word is getting out and that the proper education and historical context is also available for everyone. So I look forward to continuing the discussion, but I do want to make sure that I let everyone know that you want to make sure that someone has the energy to bring those issues up. You want to make sure that the next generation, who's extremely passionate about women's productive freedoms, is there as well on the front line for everyone in our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Coplen?
Thanks for this important question. You know, I'm the father of 2 adult young women. And at one point in their lives, it was appropriate for my wife and I to tell our daughters what to do and how to do it. But it sure as heck is not appropriate anymore for even their father to tell them what to do with their health care. So it sure as heck is not appropriate for Scott Perry, Donald Trump, or any of the other MAGA Republicans who firmly believe in taking this right away from our women. It's absolutely wrong. And very, very deliberately, I'm going to tell you, I will aggressively advocate and vote for both laws and a constitutional amendment to ensure that the reproductive freedom and bodily autonomy of all women everywhere in America is guaranteed for all time. When someone else controls your body, I know this is harsh to say and think about, But when someone else controls your body, you are effectively a slave. And that is unacceptable. Today, millions of women have essentially lost control over their own bodies thanks to the extreme conservative Republican extreme court, or Supreme Court, the extreme court, thanks to Donald John Trump. You know, it's the first time in American history that a right that has been granted has essentially been repealed. That's unacceptable. So today, millions of American women in Republican-controlled states are essentially slaves, and that's unacceptable. Now, the Republicans also, as some of my colleagues have said, they now have their eyes on banning IFF and taking women's freedom to just have contraceptives. And that's crazy. That's unacceptable. I feel very strongly about this. You can tell, and I'm sure you can tell all of us are very passionate about this. You know, I'm the son of an immigrant mother. I'm a husband. I'm obviously a father, as I mentioned. I've always believed and I've always strongly advocated for all women's rights, not just this right, and I always will. I will not stand for this assault on women's freedoms. Reproductive freedom is, in fact, a right of privacy, the right to be left alone. As I said, I will aggressively fight not only for legislation to this effect, but also for a constitutional amendment. And some people may go, that's never going to happen, Rick. Well, absolutely it can happen. Number one, if we elect Democrats. Number two, if we elect Joe Biden. Number three, if we simply listen to the people. Because it's clear the public opinion is absolutely supportive of ensuring women's reproductive freedoms and rights. So if I have enough time, I'm going to read to you a constitutional amendment in the state legislature that's already out there. I firmly agree with all these words. They're not mine, but I want you to listen to them and tell me, would you support such a constitutional amendment? Because what you think matters more than what I think. Here it is. Every individual has the fundamental right to exercise reproductive liberty and make and effectuate decisions regarding the individual's own reproduction, including the ability to choose or refuse to prevent, continue, or end an individual's pregnancy. The right to choose or refuse and the right to choose or refuse contraceptives and the right to choose or refuse fertility care, all without discrimination on the basis of race, age, disability, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, or relationship status. I'm about to run out of time. There's a little bit more to it. I ask you, would you vote for such a constitutional amendment? I would, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't think I could read your penmanship. Yeah. Now, I just want to start by saying right up front that the question of reproductive rights or abortion, these are class issues. They're really economic issues. Because we know that a woman of means is free to make her decision. A woman without means is under a lot of pressure and can make a very different decision. So that's simply a question of inequality. So it's economic inequality, it's inequality of social status, and this disproportionately affects women in low-income categories. We know this. And I know this from personal experience because I have a family member who became pregnant at the age of 19, and she made a decision a long time ago to have a child. But she was in a family that was very supportive. She had siblings who cared for her. She had her economic needs maintained, and she did not suffer as a result of this. She therefore was free to make that decision. She decided to keep the baby, and the baby is now a mature, grown, productive member of our society. So we have to first stress that point, the first point. The second thing we have to remind ourselves is that the issue of abortion was not a political issue in the 1970s. It only became a very, very controversial issue in the 1980s when Ronald Reagan wanted to split the Irish Catholic vote in the Northeast, particularly in places like Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and New York. And he succeeded at that. And it was the success of hypocrisy. The success of hypocrisy. Because the Republicans themselves did not have strong views about this. This was simply a political wedge to win political power, and it worked. The other reason why we now have to deal with this terrible situation is because the Democratic Party itself which for years made no attempt to codify reproductive rights. Never. Never. Democrats spoke about it and made no attempt when they had majorities in the House, the Senate, and they had the White House. So one, I think we definitely have to codify it this time. So whoever is elected should be an advocate for that. But even that's not enough. So I'm not going to propose a constitutional amendment. I have something, a solution which I think can be used in other areas. And that is, first of all, the Supreme Court is not a co-equal branch of government. Okay? This is a constitutional issue, or it has been. But it's a political issue above, first and foremost. So the Supreme Court is not a co-equal branch of government. The Congress has the power, if it would only use it, and if the Democrats have the majority, to circumscribe the areas of policy which the Supreme Court can rule on and cannot rule on. And reproductive rights should be circumscribed. That should not be for the Supreme Court to decide at all. And in the same instance, I would also say that the Supreme Court should have no jurisdiction, no oversight over campaign finance. Because we know that money, Donald Trump used the expression the swamp. What he's talking about is money, which is polluting our political system. And so if you wonder why we don't have a single-payer health care, if you wonder why we only have tepid response to climate change, if you wonder why we're shifting the burden of financing our government to low-income people, working-class people, it's because of the influence of money, and this should be circumscribed. So with the Dobbs ruling, which overturned Roe v. Wade, that should have, and it did, send shockwaves across the country in progressive circles. But it hasn't. We have to manifest ourselves. We have to show that we mean business. And this means that we have to win power in November. The final point I'll make about IVF is just simply, we are on the slippery slope to theocracy. Not only minority rule, but the rule of a religious organization. And this we have to put a stop to.
All right, the next question for Mr. Coplen. Started off. How would you address the climate threat as well as the concerns of fossil fuel workers? Is bipartisan climate action possible?
Thanks very much. So absolutely, every type of bipartisan action on every issue is possible, but it takes leadership and it takes experience and it takes the ability to work with members of both parties to do that. I want to highlight right up front, I've done that. I've been doing it for years as a Carlisle School Board member, working through issues, tough budget issues, tough COVID issues with Democrats and Republicans, and finding common ground. And that's always the key, is to look and to see what's the common ground. On many issues, and climate is a tremendous example, the first place and the first argument that I would make to any Republican, Independent, or Democrat is, you know what? Let's think about the future. Let's think about our children and their children and their children. And when you think about a political issue, a policy issue that way, to me, you have to think in terms of doing appropriate bipartisan right things to get our climate crisis under control, to ensure, as I said from the very beginning, very adamantly, to ensure that our children and their children have clean air, clean water, and fertile soil. And that's imperative. So I'm also going to highlight, you know, I do every now and then like to quote a few famous politicians, people that have thought about these things. And one of my favorites is from John F. Kennedy. So I also think about inspiration. I also think about the bully pulpit, not only in marshaling public opinion, because as Lincoln said, with public opinion, you can do everything. Without it, you can do nothing. But JFK said, our problems are man-made. Therefore, they can be solved by men. Well, I would change that to say now they can be solved by men and women. They can be solved by responsible men and women. That does not include Scott Perry or Donald John Trump. So one of the things we have to do with this and every single other issue is, of course, we got to defeat Scott Perry. We also need to decisively defeat Donald John Trump. So let me be brief and blunt. I support every single absolute possible way of helping to preserve our environment. I'm going to absolutely suggest that I support the things that this organization supports, the Climate Citizens Lobby. I've read some of your documentation. I'll get to that in a minute if I have time. But I support what you stand for and what what you've been advocating for. I'm going to highlight that, among other things, we must achieve a global carbon neutrality by 2050. You've heard some of these things. We've got to have objectives that make sense. We must achieve 100% renewable energy. Got it. We can't do that overnight, but over time, we can move, and we must move. And the Inflation Reduction Act that President Biden so brilliantly passed, with some bipartisan support, I believe, maybe just a little, ensured that we have things like incentives for solar and green jobs and all those things. And I understand we're all concerned about the workers in the fossil fuel industry. And absolutely, we got to help those folks and their children and our children find excellent paying jobs. So I strongly support, you can tell, some of President Biden's initiatives. We all know that there are jobs and all those things and great things. I want to highlight part of your agenda for the Citizens Climate Lobby. Measures, what we, among other things, need to do is to ensure that we have measures, and Mr. Broadhurst mentioned this, the whole idea of measuring externalities and controlling for that and charging for that. For example, the Carbon Dividend Act, I strongly support. And obviously what we're talking about doing is charging the polluters, and what that legislation would do, if we actually passed it, would be to ensure that those dividends actually go back to the people. So I strongly support that type of efficiency. I'm not sure how much time I've got left. But I also want to give a shout out to Governor Shapiro just yesterday and his action plan. I support him.
Thank you. Mr. Blake Lynch.
Your timing was impeccable, Rick.
Rarely, but sometimes.
Yes. Can you please repeat the question just to make sure I cover the points? Thanks.
How would you address the climate threat as well as the concerns of fossil fuel workers? And is bipartisan climate action possible?
Absolutely. I'll start with the end and work my way back. Is bipartisanship possible? Absolutely. It's what we have to do. For too long, we have gotten so far on the left and so far on the right that those in the middle, like myself, often get lost and forgotten. My neighbors are tired of it. You know, they've come next door. My kids were out playing in the yard with my wife before I left, and they're like, thank God that you are getting back to the middle. Oh, my goodness. Because that is what we really care for, and that's what's going to bring people to the polls. And I believe we have to make sure that we are empathetic with those who have been in industries that are declining, including those in fossil fuels. We have to make sure that our portfolio is diverse. And because of the duck curve that happens throughout each and every day, we want to make sure that, again, during the peak times, that we are assuring that those credits that come back for those who have solar and other means, they are not penalized for that as well, that when they're returned, that they can ensure that. We want to make sure that we work on a bipartisan solution because, again, we need our Republican colleagues to understand that the science is real. You know, this continued lie, because another part of the big lie that the election was stolen. It's another lie that this is happening, and it's just madness, and we all know it. So we have to make sure that you do understand that because it just snows, it doesn't mean that climate change is, not real. It is, because spring started earlier again. It was a beautiful day today in March. It is a real thing, and our next generation knows it too. We have to make sure that we're educating our children. We have to make sure that, again, natural gas and small modular units for nuclear and solar and wind are viable means for our success. Our unions want diversified opportunities to engage, especially with building all of these facilities and opportunities. We have to make sure that we continue to export, be a strong exporter of the energy that we have here in Pennsylvania as well, to, again, assure that that those in the European Union, when they come up for shortages, we can be a great provider and supplier to them too. We know how important what Norway has done for the rest of the world with being a great exporter to making sure that everyone is doing their fair share. We want to make sure that we are strong too, but we have to hold those polluters accountable. Coming from Harrisburg, actually, Harrisburg was sued by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation because of the Susquehanna River and the pollution that is taking place. I was a part of the administration that received that lawsuit. How embarrassing that we are not doing what we need to do. So we need to make sure that not only are we holding Republicans accountable, but those that our elected leaders are ensuring that the future of the future of Central Pennsylvania and the future of our natural resources is preserved. I love going outside of the district and spending time in Sullivan County, where it is gorgeous on Bear Mountain. We spend time there with family, friends, and they have a cabin there. And when we are able to get out and have no light pollution, where my kids understand where it is absolutely quiet. And again, understanding when we go out into the natural resources, that is exposure for those who may not naturally receive it. As being an African American, when I grew up in the projects of Stilton, that was not a thing. I grew up next to Bethlehem Steel, right along the steel mill, which then was a part of the flight path of Harrisburg International Airport. So when we talk about access and we talk about opportunity and understanding the importance of our next generation, we have to make sure that we are providing equal opportunity and access to those who are being underserved, and also those in rural communities, understanding the success and the reasons why fossil fuels need to go away to sustain their environment where they are raising and having this amazing forestry and also natural environments. So thank you.
Thank you. Shamaine Daniels.
Sure. So I'll do the same, and I'll start with the last part. Is bipartisan climate action possible? And that's an absolute yes. Our climate is changing, and everyone is feeling it. Our growers see their struggle managing their crops because the climate that their crops are growing in are different than the ones they were initially set to grow in. When we had the Bush administration, for example, it was Republicans in Montana who challenged a lot of Bush's policies regarding lumber in national parks, right? I talked to a lot of Republicans whose business is hunting, whose business is kind of those survivalist travel, and they are very, very animate about protecting the environment because otherwise they themselves will also go out of business. So the realities of climate change, everyone experiences them, and I think we just need to have better conversations and better language when it comes to talking about them. We also need to make sure that we are ensuring that as we transition from one form of fuel to another, that we make sure that workers are not taking the hit and not bearing the brunt of that shift, so that the jobs that we shift to are also family sustaining, or also have pensions, have the benefits that existing fossil employers can provide. I don't think anyone, even if they say that climate change isn't real, they will not say that, as Blake mentioned, that the spring came early. They will not say that we have fewer floods in this district now than we did even 10 years ago. They will not say that we don't have more boil water advisories now than we did even 10 years ago, right? So our environment is changing. Republicans and Democrats understand this, and I think we could get them to move. As Blake mentioned, I was on Harrisburg City Council when the order came in for us to clean up the Chesapeake, and one of the things that I struggled with was that we had to start to make sure that we're better managing our stormwater. And that involved learning a lot about chemistry and a lot about systems. And it was an education. And I think we don't do a good job as leaders educating our communities about how to reduce damage to our environment. And, it's incredibly important. You can see it, you can experience as you drive through the district, what it's doing to our infrastructure. The materials that we use for our roads have to be adjusted because our roads don't tolerate these warmer temperatures the way they used to. So we have to shift the materials that we use. And frankly, our biggest role once we are in office is going to be as consumers, right? It's our investments in infrastructure. As a council member, I proposed investing in solar panels for low-income residents, and that was opposed by other Democrats because there wasn't a belief that we needed to address environmental concerns, and that was a twofer. It was the environment and making housing affordable, so because of utility bills would go down when you have solar panels. We don't need just Democrats who talk about caring about the environment. We need Democrats who do things to address and remediate the environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Broadhurst?
Does this, okay, this works. Well, first of all, I have to say right up front that I don't think it is possible to have bipartisan agreement on this. So I have to disagree with everyone. I think the myth of bipartisanship is something we have to finally put to bed. We thought we were going to have bipartisanship under President Clinton. Didn't happen. We thought we were going to have bipartisan support for Barack Obama. Never materialized. We thought again, and President Biden said publicly that he expected a kumbaya sort of moment, like we're in a place of worship, coming to Jesus type of moment, and it never materialized. So now we've been waiting for 30 years for a radical fringe and minority movement within the Republican Party, which dominates the entire right, to finally negotiate, or think and negotiate in good faith. And it's just not going to happen, okay? So I want to be very, very clear on that. The only way we're going to get motion and progress on this is if we have Democratic majorities. So I think there's really no way of getting around that. The second point I want to make is that the United States is already energy independent, and it's the luck of nature, right? There are very few countries which are energy independent. So Blake made a very good point earlier when he mentioned Norway and the export of natural gas to continental Europe. I disagree with Blake when he said that the United States can now take advantage of this to export natural gas to Europe. It is a business opportunity, but it's also one that's going to have environmental consequences for the entire planet. Fracking, the entire fossil fuel industry, regardless of the category, these are the most subsidized industries in the entire country, in fact, in the entire world. These industries could not exist without federal subsidies. And so at some point, we're going to have a serious conversation with or without Republicans, but with people who vote, and I include Republican voters, on what we intend to do with our natural resources, because this is a natural resource that belongs to all of us, not to private corporations. So a couple of things, and a couple of points I make, just direct proposals, and I think most of my colleagues here will probably agree. There's been much discussion over the past 20 years on a carbon tax. This has been floated several times, rejected, never seriously adopted, and never brought to vote in the House. This is something I would want to propose, because a carbon tax is what? It's a tax on an externality, what we're dumping into the environment. That said, we have to be very mindful that with any tax that goes to corporations, who eventually pays the bill? We know who pays the bill. It's all of us, right? Consumers. Because a tax on fossil fuel or on natural gas or the fracking industry, all the costs of that will be borne by all of us. So we have to be very, very mindful of this. In Pennsylvania, we have roughly 270,000 people who work in the fossil fuel sector. I should say not the fossil fuel, the energy sector generally. Many of these jobs are dependent on the geography, where they happen to be. Many of these jobs, however, can benefit from some of the financial incentives that were part of the Inflation Reduction Act from the Biden administration. So these are things that we have to take advantage of today. So I have to commend President Biden for this, but I think he hasn't gone far enough. And the reason why he didn't go further, it's not his own fault. So I'm not criticizing President Biden. It's because of mealy-mouthed, centrist Democrats who blocked him along the way, right? And I'm thinking of a senator from West Virginia, right? A guy by the name of Manchin, who is just a walking poster for the fossil fuel industry and for corruption. So we can say this when it's a Republican, but for some reason we get all timid when it's a Democrat who's on the take and he's simply representing the fossil fuel industry. So this is a problem for all of us, but we're gonna be dealing with this for a long time, and I don't think there's a bipartisan solution in the short term.
Thank you.
Tess.
Mr. O'Brien.
Still got it. So whenever is this working? Okay. So whenever I think about climate, I think of my children, because it's their future. It's their children's future. And just to paint the picture of the backstory, I mentioned before, my wife is commanding officer right now. She's out in San Diego. My kids are out there with her while she finishes up her Marine Corps career. She's going to retire in 3 more months, and luckily be here with me, and we'll be reunited as a family, building a house up in Hampton Township, Cumberland County. But the hardest thing for me since I've been running is to have a FaceTime call with my daughter, honestly. And when I look at her and how proud of her I am for really, she's taking care of my son out there while my wife is being a commanding officer. And one of these FaceTime calls that I got back in January, you guys probably remember the rains that happened out there in San Diego. So my kids were away at school one day, and in the morning, the rain just kept on pouring and pouring and pouring. And I got a call later that afternoon after they finally made it home, after my daughter walked my son home. And they told me that the entire first floor in San Diego of their elementary school was flooded because of these rains. And they had to evacuate the entire school to the second floor, which that's crazy. And so if the Republicans need any evidence that climate change is occurring, I point to personal experience with that. And I'd invite you to do the same when you're having one of these discussions of, is this real or is this fake? I'll also say, for me, I think that, speaking of my children, but I think that climate change and our actions with climate are going to define our generation once we're all gone. And I think we need to take this extremely seriously. And I know there are various proposals that are out there in various ways on how to get from point A to point B. I'll tell you mine. And I'm going to tie this in, you probably didn't think I could do this, tie this into my military experience, right? So when I was at the Pentagon, my job there was called a transition task force. I was in charge of transitioning old aircraft to new aircraft, F-18s to F-35s. And that transition plan takes 20 years. And what we did, when I showed up there, that plan was built in terms of aircraft, transitioning one squadron to another squadron. And this will tell you a little bit about how I think. I went there and I said, no, this plan needs to be built in terms of people, because we didn't have enough people to fly those aircraft. And so when I look at the energy transition plan, I think we have the same problem. I think we are all on the same page right here in this room that we need to do something about it. But we're talking in terms of climate actions, and we're not talking in terms of people. And when I say that, I mean jobs. So every single thing that I work through within our climate and energy transition is going to be in terms of jobs. And the best way for me to go and figure out, well, what jobs work? How can we do this? Was to actually go and talk to the unions, which I have done. Because this is all about having family-sustaining jobs. That's how we get the independents and moderate Republicans, is we incentivize it with those jobs. And so I can tell you the electrical workers, they are all about wind and solar. I'll tell you the building trades, they are all about nuclear. They are all about natural gas, which that's another 4-minute conversation, right? But when we consider jobs and tell them, look, we're going to create, well, the IRA is a great example that created, if everything comes to fruition, 170,000 new jobs. And that's how we need to talk as Democrats to win over those independents and moderate Republicans, because I do agree with John that we need the political power to do something about it, but I do believe that does include having those independents and moderate Republicans, and that's how we do it.
Thank you very much. Okay. Next question. Two issues in the news recently are, one, gun violence, and two, border security. How would you approach these two difficult issues? Mr. Broadhurst.
I don't have my Gerald Ford moment, right? So the first question is gun violence. Is that right? Yeah. So I think I've been very clear and very out front on this, that I proposed a complete ban on assault weapons. Mike, for example, is not in favor of a ban on assault weapons for technical reasons which escape me. I want to, in a house of worship, I want to make a little revelation tonight. I don't often talk about my personal life, but there's something I don't do, and that is I don't pray. I don't. Fortunately, I have quite a few people praying for me. I receive text messages just about every day saying, God bless you, John, thank God for you, and so on and so forth. But I don't do it myself. And if I'm fortunate enough to be a member of Congress next year, I will not say my prayers and thoughts go out to you. I never want any congressman, I don't want to hear these words again. Not once. The staggering hypocrisy of this, the lack of moral empathy, the indifference to suffering is something I find shocking. And so we know that we will have mass murder again and again and again. And so as public servants, anyone who aspires to be a public servant has to take a very, very clear position on this. And I think everyone in the Democratic Party should be in favor of an assault weapons ban. And I'll tell you a little something else about this. I don't shoot guns, I don't have guns, but I have family members who do. And one of my family members is my brother-in-law, who is French. And he trained my own children, my 2 boys, using guns. And he would take them to the shooting range for this. And I want to tell you just how different the regulation is in the United States and in Europe, because the French rules are very similar to the rules in Italy, Germany, and elsewhere. One, when you're traveling, if you have a gun, the gun must be unassembled. It cannot be in the car, it has to be in the trunk. When you have a gun at home, again, it must be unassembled, and the bullets cannot be in the same room. They have to be under lock and key. There are no road rage experiences in Western Europe, because you'd have to get out of your car, go to the trunk, open it, put the gun together, put the bullets in it, and in the meantime, the victim is not standing waiting to get shot. Okay? Now, I'm not making light of this, but we know that everyone in Europe knows that regulations work. In China, you can't walk the streets with a machine gun. In Italy, no one has an assault weapon. And no politicians are going to give you mealy-mouthed explanations of why, well, gee whiz, we should allow it after all. So I want to be very, very clear on this. And this is one of the differences between myself and Mike. Now, the issue of immigration, border security is, I'm not sure we should tie it with gun violence. But this is also border security. I think on this issue, most of us agree that our law enforcement officials at the border need resources. Okay? But we also have to recognize that we have to understand where are these people coming from. Okay? They're not lining up the border coming from Sweden or Denmark or Italy. These are people who are doing what immigrants to the United States have always done. They're fleeing economic hardship. Right? They're seeking opportunity. Many people live, and I think some people here can speak with greater conviction about this or knowledge, in great hardship. So coming to the United States is in effect really fleeing misery, fleeing oppression. And we have to evaluate the causes of this. So in my campaign, I'm trying to address the causes. And there are no simple answers. But the fact that the United States has supported extreme right-wing regimes all across South and Central America now for the past 40 years, almost without exception, does have an impact. The very fact that we continually squeeze South and Central America with economic sanctions, which never work, also does contribute to this crisis.
Thank you. Mr. Coplen.
Gun laws and immigration, 2 critically important issues. I want to state right up front, statistically, in the next 12 minutes, an American will be killed by a gun. Think about that for a moment. And of course, we've all seen far too many times when young children, our children in America, are slaughtered by an assault weapon wielded by, yes, generally a mentally deranged person. But I think about how could have that potentially been prevented. Now, I will state right up front, I am a firm believer in tremendously improving the mental health care that's available to all Americans. And especially as a school board member, I recognize, and I've been at the forefront of trying to do this in Carlisle, I should say, to improve the mental health care for our students and for everyone. But we all recognize that that's not a sufficient solution. The Republicans, and Scott Perry has clearly voted against, and Scott Perry and Donald Trump and other people like that can clearly and should take responsibility for these continued mass shootings and things that are absolutely inappropriate and unacceptable in America. So I'm stating very clearly, and I ask you to, again, please look at rickcopelandforcongress.com. There's a whole lot of information and pledges and commitments that I have made to ensure that fewer people die from gun violence in America. So, for example, yes, it says very clearly, I do support an assault weapon ban. That doesn't mean taking assault weapons from people. It means stopping to sell them. I recognize, and as I'm going through all these things, I want to highlight, I recognize that we cannot legislate 100% with 100% certainty that we'll never have gun violence happen in America. That takes more than legislation. Just like about every one of these other issues, it takes commitment by people in our community, and I strongly believe that. But very quickly, I talk in terms of background checks. In fact, I make a commitment to universal background checks, taking guns out of the hands of domestic abusers. Yes, a red flag law. Responsible gun ownership, including mandatory reporting of lost or stolen guns. The destruction of guns that are used in crimes, and to ensure that we ban ghost guns. Okay, enough on that. Another important issue, immigration. You've probably heard me in other forums state, and I will highlight on our card, on our website, I've stated from the beginning, after doing many listening sessions, united, we all win. It's not just a slogan, it's a commitment. Because I believe firmly, having seen an American soldier's blood, and having seen the brilliance of American soldiers working together, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, to include immigrants, that is our brilliance. Our strength is diversity, and we must foster that, we must incentivize that. And at the same time, yes, of course, we need to ensure that we have better, stronger safeguards at our borders. Absolutely, we need to do a better job of funding our border security efforts, to include Border Patrol agents, to include reforming our asylum processes, to include providing more people. Oh, by the way, does this sound familiar? This is all part of where I'm going, is part and was part of the bill that obviously was hammered out and President Biden was supportive of until Donald John Trump basically convinced his Republican fellows to stop it. So that's unacceptable. Bottom line, I believe in the strength of diversity, democracy, and having a path to full citizenship for the dreamers and for everyone that deserves a chance. I really do feel passionately about this for many reasons. One is that I am the son of an immigrant mother, and I will not close the door behind me. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Daniels.
Okay, so I'll start with gun control because I'm probably the only person up here who's had to defend our city's gun control ordinances, and we've been successful. One of the first things that happened to me when I became a council member in Harrisburg was to be sued by gun rights organizations from across the country because Harrisburg had one of the few ordinances in the country that restricted the use of weapons in our public spaces, and for historical reasons, that ordinance pretty much predated the Second Amendment, so we were in a very unique position to defend. So, part of the issue with gun control is knowing what the issues are and what the policies are that will work, and the other part is getting Democrats who will stand up for those best practices and policies. We already have Congress reached an overarching agreement about some things that they would look to implement. They haven't started implementing them yet, but talking about gun regulations is probably one of the most popular topics in the United States. Americans support gun regulations, banning assault weapons, red flags rules, universal background checks. All of those are good practices and are supported broadly by the polity. So, the issue with gun control is getting people in office who will actually try to implement them. On immigration, immigration is constantly an issue that the crisis is created by Republicans and escalated in election years so that they have something to talk about while on the campaign trail. And unfortunately, a lot of Democrats just cave into the Republican talking point, right? We need comprehensive immigration reform because we have millions of people who live and produce here, and if they were simply allowed to fully integrate into our economic system, our economies would do a lot better. I just drove, on my way here, one of the storefronts that were empty, I knew the person who owned it, and I know that they were deported, and it's been empty since he was deported. York would be much better off if he was still running his business in York. But the crisis at the border is also it's a resource one, right? It's a simple one to fix. You simply hire the staff to process those asylum applications, make those decisions. We are required to make those decisions within a 6-month period. I've had clients who've been waiting decades for those decisions, right? So whether they're coming in through the border or through an airplane, the southern border or an airplane, they are our immigration system doesn't have the staff to process and welcome immigrants. It has only staff to keep them out. And that's not really helpful because it violates a lot of our international agreements when it comes to asylum. But it's also a diplomatic problem because other countries look at us like we're weak, right? When we can't handle processing a bunch of poor people from the dangerous triangle, it makes us look like, well, how are we going to handle war in Ukraine? How are we going to deal with the Israeli-Gaza issue? Because we can't deal with poor people coming and crossing the border. And I do want to take this opportunity because Democrats do cave into this, right? We should not be using our immigration system to deal with our criminal justice system because we do not want someone who murdered someone to be deported and then roam freely in a country that may not have an infrastructure to deal with them. We would rather have them in our jails here. And the reason we have some of the crisis at the border right now is because in the 90s and 70s, we deported MS-13 members who were again created in California. We sent them to the dangerous triangle and they were able to flourish there, and they took over and they created countries that are unlivable. And now we have a bigger border crisis, immigration challenge than we did back in the 90s if we had just sent them to jail. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien.
So I think John can relate to this actually a little bit. My welcome back to America moment, I was living in Japan for 2.5 years. There are no guns on the streets there. They don't even need the gun laws that we now need. It's not a thing. And so when I came back from Japan to move directly to Washington, D.C. to work at the Pentagon there, within the first week, there was a pride parade going on outside where we lived. And so I took my kids out there, my wife and kids, full family, had some friends over. And if you've never been to a pride parade, that is the place where there's more positive energy than I've ever seen in my life anywhere else. And so it was great. And so after the parade, we started walking down the street towards the circle. And all of a sudden, everybody kept on running, like our direction, running and screaming. And they were screaming that there was an active shooter. And I'm here with my 3-year-old, my 5-year-old, and thinking, what are we going to do? Like, they can't run with the crowd. And so what we did is we found a building and we hid in the alleyway in a doorstep and waited for everybody to pass us until there was nobody left. And when we poked our heads back out, we made sure there wasn't somebody with a gun waiting for us. But what that moment did, it made me realize that we now live in a world where when we drop our kids off at school, we don't know if they're going to come home. And that's not okay. And so I want to be very clear where I stand on this issue. As somebody who has fired assault weapons before and understands that those are weapons of war, that I do want to get rid of all assault weapons in civilian society. Now, the difference between John and I, it's how to get from point A to point B. Okay? John would wait for a critical mass of Democrats to come up and then do something about it. Well, guess what? That's not happening. All right? You need to work with the other side. And so my philosophy on this is, and I'll agree with Rick here, it's like you don't go and you take people's guns. My philosophy is I would like to stop the sale and transfer of assault weapons while instituting gun buyback programs to incentivize that, to put some carrots out there, as opposed to just running into people's house and taking their weapons, because guess what's not going to win an election here in PA10? That right there, okay? So that's where that comes from. So that's guns. I'll say handgun violence as well. Every point that Rick hit on, I think the first thing that we got to do is ban ghost guns, because the illegal gun trafficking that goes on in cities right now, that's where most of the gun violence comes from. So ghost guns, kits, 3D printing, and then very big on red flag laws and universal background checks as well. In the Marine Corps, whenever there was a mental health issue, the very first thing I would do was sign an order that is literally called do not issue. And so if the Marine Corps can do that with red flag laws, I think we can expand that here in civilian society as well. To the border. So I do think we need to secure the border because we can't have an adult discussion on asylum, on anything that's going on border policies without getting our arms around the problem, okay? So that's step number one. And then I am absolutely for pathways to citizenship and expanding that, especially based on family ties and especially based on skilled labor as well. Like, look, I lived in border towns for, I think it's 12 years of my life in Yuma, Arizona, in South Texas, and also in San Diego. So I've seen what's going on down there, and I can tell you that there are undocumented workers. They're already contributing to our society. It's simply incorporating them into the tax code, into our society, because that's going to, when they can join a union, that's going to raise wages for everybody. So I'm absolutely for pathways to citizenship. The asylum system, again, that's broken, so got to provide funding for that bureaucracy and for the additional staffing as well, which we know that's why it takes so long right now.
You? Mr. Lynch?
I'm going to stand for the first time tonight. I'll come around. This is an amazing place to be. So this is a passionate issue for me. I feel very confident saying that I'm the only person that is sitting before you today that actually has on-the-ground experience when it comes to local law enforcement. So for 4 years, I worked as the Director of Community Relations for the Harrisburg Bureau of Police. Understanding the issues that happen, as I mentioned on the onset, I worked with Chief Michael Muldrow. I worked with Chief Bay in Lancaster. I worked with Chief Landis in Carlisle about addressing this issue right here. Gun violence in our local communities. There's no reason why my 9-year-old has to go through active shooter drills at his elementary school when we used to do tornado drills. That is unimaginable, and it is a place that should not occur. Our next generation is so vital to our success. And when we talk about continuing to move forward with taking guns off the street, respectfully, gun buyback programs don't work. They don't. Why? Because I've worked alongside officers every single day, and we've done it as the city of Harrisburg. We've offered that. But you know who turns guns in? Those who, their spouses pass away, and others, guns are broken. The bad guys aren't turning their guns in. That's just not happening. But what we need to do is make sure that we fully fund and provide resources to local law enforcement through the federal means to give them the assistance that they need. We need to make sure that we do further hardline stances with not just banning ghost guns, but actually 3D printer manufacturers, because that's how it gets started. We need to make sure that we're putting regulations on the actual bullets so that they are traceable. When we talk about that, so we can help our detectives and our law enforcement agencies try to, again, address the issues that are happening with taking the guns and removing them off the streets. These are serial numbers that are untraced, and these are things that our law enforcement professionals go through every single day. When we talk about assault weapons that are on the streets, I've actually come up on traffic stops where a 13-year-old in Allison Hill has a gun in between his legs. Imagine our officers want to get home safely, just like everyone in those vehicles. But that is not a thing that should be occurring. And what people are doing is and this is proven in Dauphin County from many, many investigations, those who are from rural communities are taking their guns and trading them for drugs in the city. That's what's happening. It's FBI has proven it. I've worked with the AG's office, the ATF's office, and that is what's happening. That's why we have gang task force throughout our central PA region. That is what's happening. How else would a 13-year-old or a 15-year-old get a gun? They're not walking into the gun store to buy it. But what do they have access to? Drugs that are coming from New York and Virginia and Ohio over lines, because 81 and 83 and 15 are great corridors for not just commerce, but also drugs. So we have to make sure we address that. And then when we talk about immigration at the border, there's so many people that want to provide and assist with the success of not just central Pennsylvania, but of the United States of America. So I absolutely am in support of a pathway to citizenship and DACA enhancements. We want to make sure that what President Obama was able to do with holding the line on deportations, he actually deported and held the line stronger than President Trump. And that's a fact. So I believe that the Biden administration should go back and start prioritizing DOJ caseloads again and making sure that the DOJ has the resources necessary. Our border agents need help and assistance. They need to make sure they have the resources as well. And again, everyone wants to contribute to the success. We need to hold our allies accountable in the Central America countries, because if we're providing them humanitarian aid and federal funding, your taxpayer dollars, they need to do more to stop the flow of immigrants who are coming through their countries to our country as well.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much, guys. So now we're at the very fun part where we have questions from the audience. Look at all these fine questions here. Now I know we're a little short on time a little bit, but I think we can strengthen, we can try to get these all in here. So first question, and we'll just go right down the line. How will you strengthen democracy? Give concrete examples.
Well, first, I guess I would obviously support the John Lewis legislation and obviously replacing Scott Perry.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Democracy, give concrete examples.
In under 10 seconds?
A minute. I'm just trying to keep
Strengthening democracy. Okay, well, just very quickly, this is not going to come easy. The way you strengthen democracy is getting money out of democracy. You can't have both. You really can't. So we know that there is a very, very weak correlation between your vote and public policies that are adopted in Congress. Okay? This is why Donald Trump used the expression the swamp, and everyone knows it. And so we also know that there are, in the halls of Congress, many congressmen who view their jobs as being in the minor leagues, right? They're in Congress, they keep their jobs for as long as they can, and they want to monetize that experience to become lobbyists and increase their income by maybe 5%, fivefold, all right? This is the farm league. Congress is the farm league. So that's not easy to do. I mean, you can't, this is always going to be the biggest problem in American democracy is money. So we have unrepresentative democracy as it is already, and this is what's eating away to our democracy and why we're on the verge of fascism.
So excited to answer this and knock Rick's cup over. So I actually agree with John as well. And again, there's not a lot of daylight between us on this issue, but I absolutely agree that it's money in politics. It is closing corporate loopholes. Our tax structure has over 10,000 pages in it. Why? You know, I mean, if we look at how important it is to ensure the success, if you make it so complicated, make a thing so complicated, no one wants to look at it. And that is where we need to continue to shine the light. And that is on our tax structure, and that is also on closing corporate loopholes. Because when you talk about taking money out of politics or having federal regulations on how much a person can give or where they actually come from, the dark money case, Citizens United, I mean, these are all things that help contribute and stop a democracy. So I absolutely agree with John on that one, and we have to make sure that we do more to not only hold all of us accountable here at the local level, you know, that get the chance to meet with all of you, but there should be regulations, again, more stricter regulations on where the flow of money comes in. Because it's unimaginable to think that, you know, for certain communities, you know, the median income is only $50,000 or $60,000, but their congressman is raising hundreds of thousands of dollars. Where are they getting that from?
Thanks for the question. I think I prompted this. I was the one that said, hey, I'm all about strengthening our democracy so it's more responsive to you and all of us. I'm going to highlight, I began this campaign with listening sessions. I will continue listening sessions as your representative for all time, because that's what the first and most important thing that we must do. We must be listening to you as the people, and we must respond. I have to note, and this is the first time, there's only 5 of us up here tonight. There should be 6, and that other candidate has done this in several other instances. If you're going to represent our district, you have to be out there with the people listening. I've been doing that. We should all be doing that. But I also want to highlight, again, you can go to our website and you can see I'm a strong supporter of the John Lewis Act, of the For the People Act. everything we can do to ensure that everyone has the right and the ability to vote easily. The Republicans are trying to roll that back. That's unacceptable. I've said also, we have to stop gerrymandering. We need fair districts. And absolutely, I'm a huge supporter of getting money out of politics. Thank you.
Great answer. I'll agree with him. I think step one is independent redistricting for sure. We need competition within our elections between Democrats and Republicans. So I think that's number one. Number two, let's make Election Day a national holiday so everybody can get out there and vote. I would even go further and go with same day registration as well. We need as many people to vote as possible. And Citizens United, I think again, there's no daylight on this for all of us. But where there is daylight on who can beat Scott Perry. Because guess what? That's step number one. And I'll tell you that I have the resume, the resources, and have built the coalition to do so. So the resume, I'm going to plan on challenging Scott Perry on his oath of office, the oath that my wife and I upheld, and the oath that Scott Perry betrayed. And I'm going to be able to take away all of his self-stated advantages of freedom, patriotism, national service, and leadership, and turn them into disadvantages from a position of recency and credibility. You're about to ring the bell.
Thank you very much. How's everyone feeling? Feeling good? You got one more? You got one more in you? You guys got one more in you? Okay. All night, that's too long. The U.S. is one of a few countries where the climate crisis is politicized. What would you do to reach across the aisle to get it addressed? Ms. Daniels?
I think, like I've mentioned earlier, really localizing the conversations, because when you tell a Republican that there's climate change, they will say no, but when you tell them that their waterways are more polluted and they can't water their crops, they recognize that they have to take greater steps. So I think as we talk about the issues in terms of the problems that people are facing, we're more likely to get consensus and agreement with folks across the aisle.
Should we just go? On that point, I have to agree with Shamaine. It is a question of the language you use, the way you talk about it. In that respect, I'd also agree with Mike on that point. We do have to emphasize job creation, economic sustainability, but we can't get around talking about personal responsibility and corporate responsibility. So we know that we know who the largest emitters of CO2 are. We know which industries are the greatest producers. We also know that some of these companies pay nothing in taxes. That, in fact, they pay their senior executives more than they contribute in taxes. So I would like to get away from some of the narrative traps that Democrats impose on themselves. And when we say fair share of taxes, we have to shift towards progressive taxes, which is really a foundational bedrock of American democracy. So when we start saying fair share, we're accepting defeat already. So I think it is a question of language, it's a question of opportunity, creating opportunity. It's also incentivizing individuals and corporations to, with unfortunately financial grants and subsidies, to make that transition in a more affordable way, because not many people can afford a fancy and expensive electric vehicle.
But tend to agree with John on that, and also then emphasize that when we look at the large portion of our community tends to not be in the top 10%. Repeat that again. The large majority of our community tends not to be in the top 10%. So to his end point, when we talk about $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 electric vehicles, when we talk about retrofitting our homes for geothermal, how expensive is that? That is unrealistic for so many people, especially so many Americans. And it's important that we move forward towards it. Or even if you live in an old home that's 100 amp and you need now 220, like you have to retrofit that. Even some of our policies in the city of Harrisburg, some of the ordinances require, when you pull permits, they have to redo the whole thing. So what we're finding is that then, electrical sockets are jerry-rigged because people, and jimmy-rigged because people can't afford it. So we have to provide more incentives for people to engage in these opportunities, and not just tax benefits, but direct cash benefits as well. You can't afford to front that money and then try to hope that it works out.
Thanks. So if I understood the question correctly, it's how do we essentially depoliticize as best we can this whole issue of climate crisis and doing all that. So my answer, number one, I already gave you the first part of it earlier, and that is simply we have to recognize that public opinion is the source of strength for democracy, and we have to marshal public opinion. We have to be able to be a strong advocate. I've done that for years on the school board and in many other instances. So you have to be able to look people in the eye, number one, listen to them, and also say to them, you know what, it's all about the future. It's all about our children. It's all about clean air, clean water. You've heard all this from me before, but I believe that there's power in those words. I also believe there's power in the wisdom of some of our previous leaders. John F. Kay said, you know, we all live on the same small planet. We all breathe the same air, and we all cherish our children's future. We all cherish our children's future. I know that reasonable Republicans are receptive to that argument because I've been using it with them and it works.
So I gave my number one answer earlier is talking about this in terms of jobs. But I'll say answer number two is support Citizens Climate Lobby. Because guess what? They're a bipartisan organization. And they come up with some great ideas. And I know that what's going on right now in Congress, they're holding back with the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. And they're waiting for Republican signees onto that act. And so I absolutely support that in theory. Again, I don't know where it stands right now, but that's what we got to do. We shift the incentive structure overall. And so that's what, again, talking more about economics, that's what's going on here. So if you're not familiar, Europe is pushing us actually right now. They're going to start a carbon border tariff that if we don't get our stuff together, we're going to lose, I think it's $17 billion in potential sales. And so here in America, in order to align with what Europe is doing, we kind of need to do the same thing, institute a border tariff. That'll fight against China and Russia. And then also carbon tax and dividend, which means put money back into people's pockets. We got to talk about that more than the tax portion of it.
Thank you very much. All right, everybody. Well, first and foremost, thank you, Rick Coplen, Blake Lynch, Shamaine Daniels, John Broadhurst, Mike O'Brien for showing up. I appreciate it very much. And thanks to our sponsors, and thanks to everyone in our audience. We kind of do it for you guys, so we really appreciate it. And thank you for your interest in our democracy. Hope you all have a very good evening. Thank you.